Hey everybody. So I just want to make this quick video to demonstrate basically something that I had a challenge with and I was able to finally resolve with some help from the internet and also just some tinkering. I don't know if anybody will ever run into this scenario at home in the future. Basically what I was trying to do is I have two ISPs. I would live in the country now and I have to work remotely. And we don't have the best internet. Essentially what we have is we have Viasat, so satellite internet right now for our house. I am hopeful that Starlink, I'm on the wait list. Hopefully it'll be here one day. But until then, we've got to, deal with what we have. We tried some DSL, wasn't working. It was just absolutely horrible. So we've got the Viasat, works pretty well for the house, streaming, basic internet. And then for what I do for work, I was able to get an unlimited AT&T hotspot. And as long as I don't stream things like Netflix and other streaming stuff, they said it shouldn't be a problem. It'll be fine. It's unlimited. And so far, I've been using it for about 3.5 weeks, and it's been great. No problems. My challenge is I have a lot of network equipment. I have a lot of things that I do. I live in the nerd space. I work in the nerd space. And so I was trying to make it to where things would be a little more seamless for me. And so essentially what we've got here is we've got the Viasat, the home network on router 1. And what I've done is I've got a lot of VLANs here. I also wanted to move my ESXi VMware server over because I've got about 20 some odd VMs that I run on there for work and some other things that I do in my free time. And I didn't want those all pinging out on that hotspot and using up all that data and creating maybe any challenges with AT&T. So I want that on the home network, but then I've got my work network over here, and I've got the other router. I've got my AT&T hotspot. I've got a couple of VLANs here, and I've got a couple of desktops, my laptop, etc. My problem is, though, I really need to utilize that ESXi host. I need to access those machines, and I don't want things going out over the internet and back over. I want to have that local access. So essentially, I was trying to figure out a way to bridge my two router gateways together, but I was running into problems with how it was automatically creating some routes, and I also could not get access to these other VLANs. I was able to get the router connected, but I couldn't get the routes to work appropriately. So I wanted to show really quickly what I was able to do to resolve this. I'm super excited. Things are working. But I wanted to, in case anybody else runs through this problem in the future, I had went out and bought me a little more expensive pfSense router. It was beautiful, great equipment. I'm not dogging it at all. It had the multiple WAN capability. But what I've run into with that one and also some other devices, even my EdgeMax here that does support dual WAN, is it's usually only in a failover or a load balance configuration. It's not really designed to allow me to have two gateways within the configuration that I can say, hey, if I'm on this network, use this internet connection, and if I'm on this network, use this internet connection. Instead, it basically isolates everything into the two gateways and thus was not allowing me to have the routing that I needed when I was using a single routing device. So I went back to the two routers and I started tinkering. And essentially what I was able to do is get these two routers now to talk to each other, and I've got full access to all of my VLANs while still making sure that things that are on this router are using this internet connection and things that are on this router are using this internet connection. So let me show you really quickly what I did. Now, I am using the EdgeMaxes. I love these things. They're super affordable. I know they're a little more expensive now, but I got a couple 5 ports here, and I bought them back a couple years ago for like $50. I think they're like $70 or $80 now. But again, they're great little devices. They're good troopers. They get the job done, and there's quite a bit of configuration you can do. I just have run into some issues here and there where it's hard to find, if you're not, an expert when it comes to CLI configuration with routing devices. It can be a challenge sometimes to find examples of what you're trying to do. Got to scour the web, right? So essentially, what we've done is I've got my bridges together. But the first thing I want to talk about that I had to do, because what was happening is when I was connecting router A and router 1 and router 2 together, is it was coming into the routing table and it was creating a second destination for internet to the actual network port that I was connecting. Now, these are actually good here, but I'll show you what I did to eliminate this from accidentally happening over here on the work network. So here I've only got one, and that's all I wanted. But before when I was connecting it, it was creating another one, and it was just jacking up how my internet connectivity was working. It was trying to route everything back to the other router, which, again, we don't want to do. I want to keep that traffic separate. So after Googling, spending a lot of time on my phone and everywhere else, I did find an article over on the Ubiquiti community forums. And the exact thing here that this gentleman, he was trying to do something very similar to what I was doing. Not exactly what I was doing, but very similar. And so what we did is before you make that connection to the two routers, we go into the CLI of the router we're connecting to or from, and we go ahead and run this command on the Ethernet device that we're going to connect to. And so what this essentially tells it to do is that when it sets up my DHCP or even my static, that we're not going to do a default route. So we're doing no update. So it does not create a default route, and it doesn't mess up my internet connection. So this command here was vital. If I wouldn't have had this, it still wouldn't have been working. I still would have been having a lot of problems. So essentially what we did then, I have here, this is my office router. Okay, so this is the one that I've got the hotspot on, and I want to connect it over to the home network with everything else. So essentially what I did is, by default, if you're familiar with some of the Ubiquiti EdgeMax products, when you do the default setup, it does bind all your ports to that switch port, right, to your virtual port, or your virtual switch. So I did have to come in here, and I did go ahead and remove the port that I wanted to connect or bridge over. So that's E4, that's what I'm using. So I removed this from my virtual switch, because if I don't, I can't modify or set any properties on it. Then I basically went over to port 4, and I went ahead and told it, instead of a no address, I set it to a DHCP, and then it's pulling this DHCP address now, this .10 address, it's pulling that from my home network. That's my primary network. And then I went ahead and set this as a static reservation on my home router. I could have set this as static, but again, as I was going through, I just thought, let's try DHCP, it's tinkering. But I did go ahead and set that reservation, so this should never change. All right, so that essentially then also creates a route automatically in here. It created this E4 interface route for that home network, that .10 network that's on my other router. And you know what? At that point, my bridge was working great. I could connect to this network. I could see devices on there, no problem. I also then, over on my home network here, so this is my home Ubiquiti router. This is where I've got all of the other VLANs. Everything's working great. I did also come in here and create an actual static route so I can get back over from the home to my work network, right? So I did create this route. So to get to that .200 network, then I want to use that IP as my next hop, and we're doing that on switch 0. And that worked great too. So I can get to the two networks. Well, my challenge, the thing that I was banging my head against was, if I go back here to the home, I have these VLANs, right? I got VLAN 100, 125, 150. I could not reach these from my other router. And I'm like, so it tells me in my head, okay, well, you just need to create some static routes. So I was coming in here doing, okay, let's do a gateway route. Let's, we want to connect to this network. Cool. We're going to throw in that next hop address, right, that we had on the other one, just like we had before. That wasn't working. So then I was like, okay, well, let's just create a direct interface route. We want to use E4. Still wasn't working. Could not get it to work. So by luck, just by playing around, I'm like, well, maybe I need to add the VLAN on this router too, but I'm like, that doesn't make sense because I don't want the VLAN over here. But I think comes down to the VLAN awareness. And again, I'm not a networking expert. I'm a software and I do security stuff, but this is just a lot of new stuff to me. So what I did was, here on the work network, I went ahead and came in and did my add VLAN interface, and I selected that VLAN, right, set it up, and I said, let's bind that to my interface 4, because that's the connection that's going back to my home network that VLAN's on. And I went ahead and set the address, and then that created this entry here. As soon as I did this, immediately I had visibility and access to this VLAN over here on the home network, and everything was just working. This one entry over on the other router, adding that VLAN awareness, seemed to make the two talk together. I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but I will tell you that's the only way I have been able to figure this out, and everything is working the way I want it to now. So now I actually have, if we go back to our diagram, I still have that home network, right? I've got that router here. It's using the Viasat. I've got all this fun stuff here running these VLANs. I've got the office network here using that awesome AT&T hotspot. That's what I'm using to record this video right now. And I've now created a bridge between my two routers, and I can now visibly see the VLANs on both networks, and I can connect to everything that I need to connect to. Now, one note here, I did only add the .100 VLAN, and so technically I can only still see over here on the home network, I can only see this VLAN. I cannot see this VLAN, I cannot see this VLAN. I did play around though, and if I go and add it just like I did, it does give me that visibility. This is my IoT network though, and I don't actually want visibility into that. This is actually a closed off network that I have set up, and I have firewall rules to make sure that things like the thermostats and the Alexas, they can talk to each other on that network, but they can't talk anywhere else, and we can't talk to them and vice versa. But so I didn't want to expose those, but again, all it comes down to is coming back over here and adding that VLAN entry to that actual interface on the other router. Hope this was helpful. I'll put some notes in there around the command that I did, a link to that article. Again, if anybody else ever needs to do something really funky like I did here, we know how to do it now. Cheers. Have a great day.